Inside the palace, the conversation was also heating up, especially when Edjop demanded that the president should assure the people that he won't run for a third term. To which Marcos replied, "Well, I am bound by the constitution not to seek a third term." But Edjop was not content in his reply. Sabi niya, and I quote, "Put it in writing. Sign a document that makes this promise that you won't seek another re-election." End of quote. Dito napikon si Marcos. Ang reply niya, "Who are you to tell me what to do? You are only a son of a grocer."
Hello! Welcome back to another episode of Shakers and Shapers, Personalities of Martial Law, kung saan pinag-uusapan natin ang iba't ibang mga karakter at personalidad na humubog o yumanig sa madilim na bahagi na ito ng ating kasaysayan. This is Vegal Porha.
This is Aaron Malyari.
This is Lee Candelaria.
And I'm Joselito Ebro.
And you are tuned in to podcast, Conversations on Philippine History, Politics, and Society.
So, para sa ating ika-4 na episode this season, pag-uusapan natin itong very remarkable na individual na nag-google ng kanyang kakayahan, talino at buhay para labanan ang diktatorya. Walang iba kundi si Edgar Jopson o mas kilala sa bansag na Edjop.
Okay, so sino ba si Edjop? No? So nabibilang siya dun sa tinatawag natin na first quarter storm generation. No? So ito yung mga kabataan na sangkot sa aktivismo noong unang bahagi ng rehimeng Marcos. No? So nagsimula si Edjop bilang student leader at nagpatuloy nga sa yung tinatawag na mas mataas na antas ng pakikibaka.
Exactly. So, like a lot of his contemporaries, Edjop was shaped by a strong tradition of militancy during his time. But his biographer, Benjamin Pimentel, characterized his journey as somewhat unusual dahil sa unique na development niya bilang isang revolutionary. Because in a strict sense, Edjop was not a radical from the get-go. As a matter of fact, more to the ire of his more radical counterparts, he started as the poster boy of the moderate faction of student activists.
Yes, because while he was not necessarily born with a silver spoon in his mouth, his parents, Hernan Jopson and Josefa Mirasol Jopson, managed to grow their small sari-sari store into a thriving and prosperous supermarket na naging Jopson Supermarket. And this enabled them to send their children to good schools. Edjop, the second child in the brood of 9, born on September 1, 1948, studied at the prestigious Ateneo de Manila University.
As a student, Edjop was nothing short of excellent. So something I can relate to. Joke lang. He was top of his class at Ateneo High School and proceeded to take management engineering at the Ateneo de Manila University. He finished his 5-year program in 4 years. No? So imagine nyo, noong panahon na yun, wala pa namang chat GPT. No? Pero nakatapos siya ng 4 years sa isang 5-year course. I think that's a big achievement for a student. But what made Edjop remarkable in his days at the university was his leadership. No, he was student council president and was elected as the national president of the National Union of Students of the Philippines, or NUSP, in 1969. So, ang dami niyang extracurricular activities. Student leader siya. Tapos, 4 years lang itinapos yung 5-year program niya. So, I think isa na namang point achievement yan. So, yung first term niya as NUSP president coincided with Marcos's first re-election.
At this time, no, so NUSP was more associated with moderate student leaders and activists. No? One of the most important moments in Edjop's politicization was his time in NUSP. No, nabanggit natin kanina that Edjop belonged to the so-called first quarter storm generation. Pero ano ba muna kasi yung first quarter storm? Diba? No? So ito yung naging bansag sa pagsulong ng kabi-kabilang kilos protesta, mobilizations, and strikes noong unang 3 buwan ng taong 1970 na bunsod din ng maraming historical conditions. No? Nandyan halimbawa yung Vietnam War, which was heavily protested in the United States, no? And in other countries. Nangyari din yung Vatican II no, yung serye ng mga progresibong reforma sa simbahang Katoliko. At masasabi natin na yung general climate of youth activism and militancy was of course really was being seen all over the world, not just in the Philippines, no. So pero dito sa Pilipinas, kinatawan din ito ng noon ay umuusbong na kilusang kabataan, no, kasama ang iba pang mga sektor, no. Pinamunuan yan ng mga radikal na samahan kagaya ng Kabataang Makabayan or yung KM na tinatag noong 1965 at yung halimbawa yung Samahang Demokratikong Kabataan or yung SDK.
So mula doon sa dalawang organizations na yun, nagmumula yung mga mas militante at radikal na orientasyon. And Edjop was not part of it. In fact, he was a despised moderate and was even beratingly accused of being a clerico-fascist. Gayunpaman, bilang Pangulo ng NUSP, isa sa pinakamalaking pambansang samahan ng mga kabataang mag-aaral ng panahong yon, Edjop led a historical protest actions that demanded democratic reforms in the pre-martial law years of the Marcos administration.
Exactly. At isa sa mga, kumbaga, ay ikutang pangyayari dito ay yung January 26, 1970 mobilization na ginanap noong SONA ni Ferdinand Marcos na nangyari sa Kongreso. Noong araw na to, tulad ng inaasahan, nagkaroon ng madaming mga pagtitipon at marcha sa iba't ibang bahagi ng Kamaynilaan bago sila nag-converge nga sa venue ng SONA. So si Edjop at ang NUSP ay naroroon, meron silang programa at ang kanilang mga pangunahing panawagan ay isang non-partisan constitutional convention. Maalala na si Marcos, ang mga panahon na to ay nagsusulong ng charter change na madiing tinutulan ng mga puwersang oposisyon kasi alam nila na gagamitin lamang ang CONCON para mapalawig ang kapangyarihan ni Marcos. Pangalawa, they were also demanding that Marcos not seek a third term matapos itong kasisimula nga niyang ikalawang termino. So, 1 hour into the program, ayon sa tala ng biographer ni Edjop na si Benjamin Pimentel sa librong UG, An Underground Tale, The Unusual Journey of Edgar Jopson and the First Quarter Storm Generation, dumating daw yung mga radikal na grupo ng KM at SDK at nagsimulang uminit yung sitwasyon kasi they were forcing their way to the front of the program. And of course, needless to say, naroroon ang Metrocom, ang kapulisan, na handang pigilin ang mga estudyante at kabataan.
Edjop wanted to de-escalate the situation kasi ang daming mga kabataan ang nandun dun sa kanilang mobilization. Mga member organizations ng NUSP, mga delegation mula sa mga private and Catholic high schools and colleges in Manila. So yung kwento dyan ay itong si Edjop, he seized the microphone and did not want to allow KM leader Gary Olivar to deliver a speech. So galit na galit sa kanya, syempre, yung mga radikal. Gayunpaman, bigo si Edjop na ma-de-escalate yung situation. Nagsimulang umatake ang Metrocom and the students, of course, fought back by hurling stones, mga bote, mga ganyan. So basically, nagkagulo. Edjop was reportedly so mad and frustrated and believed that the radicals caused the violence that ensued that night. But overall, he lamented the failure of unifying the student movement noon sa moment na yon.
Iconic tong moment na to, no? Dito nangyari na noong paglabas ng mag-asawang Marcos, paglabas ni Ferdinand at ni Imelda, hinagisan sila ng isang kabaong na gawa sa karton at crocodile effigy, no? Crocodile effigy ng mga protesters na bilang simbolo ng pagkamatay ng demokrasya and at the same time yung kasakiman at pagkaganid ng mga Marcos, no? So a riot ensued and went on till late at night. No? Arrests were made, of course, and protesters were beaten up at actually 2 estudyante yung namatay, no? Matapos yung gabing yun. In many ways, itong January 26, 1970 ay mahalaga kasi tinitignan to bilang simula nga noong first quarter storm and the public looked on in shock, no, both by the boldness of the activists and at the same time the brutality of the police, no. So and of course at the center of this event was Edgar Jopson, no, pero simula pa lang ito ng kanyang ika nga ay unusual journey.
So a few days after this fateful night, Marcos agreed to receive students in Malacanang for a dialogue. So isa sa mga naimbitahan nga doon ay si Edjop bilang NUSP president, and that was in January 30th. Habang nasa loob si Edjop, mobilizations were already happening sa Mendiola at sa labas ng palasyo. And these protests were not any less violent than the one happened a few days ago. This would soon go down in history as the Battle of Mendiola. Inside the palace, the conversation was also heating up, especially when Edjop demanded that the president should assure the people that he won't run for a third term. To which Marcos replied, "Well, I am bound by the Constitution not to seek a third term." But Edjop was not content in his reply. Sabi niya, and I quote, "Put it in writing. Sign a document that makes this promise that you won't seek another re-election." End of quote. Dito napikon si Marcos. Ang reply niya, and I quote, "Who are you to tell me what to do? You are only a son of a grocer." End of quote.
Iconic din yung moment na yan talaga. Pero pinapakita no, na may intel si Marcos about Edjop. So alam niya na anak ng grocer si Edgar Jopson. So Edjop would serve another term as NUSP president. Tapos after niyang makagraduate sa Ateneo, he decided to study law and enrolled at the UP College of Law. Pero after 2 years, Edjop stopped going. Sa kwento ni Pimentel sa biography ni Edjop, disillusioned si Edjop. Sabi niya, ano ba naman tong mga inaaral namin? Mga batas na para lang sa mga mayayaman. So, then Edjop started working with the labor sector. Sa dami ng mga opportunities na pwede niyang kunin, pwede siyang magtrabaho abroad, pwede siyang pumasok sa pagnenegosyo, pero pinili niyang pasukin yung pag-uunyon. Bago pa man madeklara ang batas militar, nakikita na yung unti-unting pagka-radicalize kay Edjop. Nagkaroon ako noon ng pagkakataon many years ago to interview his widower, Joy Jopson Quintanar. At kinukwento niya sa akin na they had a chance to visit China. They had a chance to go on an educational visit sa China para tingnan kung paano yung buhay sa isang communist society. Ito ay kasagsagan ng Cultural Revolution. And according to Joy, after that visit, Edjop became convinced of the communist ideology. And so much to the surprise of his radical contemporaries who despised him and his moderate politics as a student leader, Edjop became a candidate member and then a full-time member of the Communist Party of the Philippines.
Sobrang laki ng contribution ni Edjop sa kilusang manggagawa. No? Naging political officer siya sa mga union. He sat in the collective bargaining agreement negotiations and really gave the employers a hard time. Numating nga daw sa point na nagre-request na yung mga management na baka pwedeng wag naman si Edjop yung paupuin sa mga negotiation kasi masyado raw siyang magaling. Alam rin niya kasi paano mag-isip itong mga kapitalistang ito kasi syempre, pamilya niya, negosyante rin naman. At some point actually, Edjop organized the workers in their family's supermarket, much to the dismay of Hernan Jopson. No? Nagkaroon nga daw silang mag-ama ng di pagkakaunawaan dahil dito. Pero syempre, malinaw kasi kay Edjop kung saan siya titindig eh. Diba? Sa side lagi siya ng manggagawa, sa panig lagi siya ng masa.
And Edjop stood with the people with utmost dedication and competence. No? In fact, he was at the helm of the first ever successful labor strike done in the midst of martial law in 1975. No? So ito nga yung strike sa La Tondena. No? Kung maalala natin, no, sa ilalim ng martial law, pinagbawal ang labor strikes. No? Pero sabi sa declaration, bawal sa essential industries and services. So, ang naging argument ng mga strikers sa La Tondena ay hindi naman essential yung alcohol kasi yung La Tondena is a brewery, no? So at yung product nila ay alak, no? So naging matagumpay yung strike, pero more importantly, nagsilbing watershed moment ito sa labor movement nung mga panahon na yon kasi of course it became in many ways a spark, no? Nasundan yung La Tondena ng ilan pang mga strike at kilos protesta.
So Edjop was already working full-time for the movement. After several years, he would climb up the ranks of the CCP cadre. So, as many others like him who decided to have life of simple living and hard struggle, Edjop went underground. Adopted different names, recruited party members, organized political units. By 1977, he was already a second tier member of the CPP. He started taking more responsibilities and became a member of the party's Central Committee. And in 1979, Edjop took over the Manila Rizal Commission and later that year would be arrested for the first time. So he, along with his comrades, were taken in house raids sa Las Piñas City. So sa kulungan, kagaya ng napakaraming political prisoners noong batas militar, dumanas si Edjop ng torture. In fact, isa sa mga kwento, dinalaw siya ng tatay niya sa kulungan tapos sabi daw ni Edjop kay Hernan Hopson, and I quote, "Dad, sabihin mo sa kanila, patulugin nila ako. Hindi nila ako pinapatulog." End of quote. So this indicates that he underwent prolonged interrogation. At syempre, alam natin na sa kontekstong ito, may kasamang physical at mental na pagpapahirap dyan. Later, Edjop would put it in writing, naming all his torturers during his arrest.
While in prison, the notorious General Rodolfo Aguinaldo tried to recruit Edjop to be a military informant. Alam kasi nitong si Aguinaldo yung history nitong si Edjop na komo galing siya sa may kayang pamilya, na dati siyang moderate activist, o moderate student activist rather. Akala niya papayag itong si Edjop na mag-flip ng sides. No? So, dadalhin siya sa bahay ni Aguinaldo while in transport, tinakasan niya yung mga bantay niya. And immediately, si Edjop ay bumalik sa kanyang mga comrades. No? And he was reassigned to Samal, Bataan to resume his party work where he went by the name of Gusting. Dito sa Bataan, Edjop lived with the farmers and their families. Nagsaka siya, nag-organisa. Although sabi nila medyo out of place daw si Edjop doon sa baryo kasi nga medyo may pagkatisoy, kutis atenista, namumula pag nainitan ng araw. So medyo nakarelate ako doon.
Sorry naman, Edjop. Actually, maganda yung kwento ni Joy Hopson dito. Kasi kung tama yung pagkakaalala ko, dito sila na-reunite mag-asawa. Kasi, syempre during this time, Joy was also a party member na rin. So, meron silang mga separate na trabaho para sa partido. And according to Joy, yung area sa Bataan kung saan sila na-assign ay isang baryo kung saan malakas yung presence ng party. And the party collective was at the time, kumbaga running the community. So, they were the ones, for example, settling disputes, taking care of community affairs, and they actually liked what they saw. Sabi doon nila sa sarili nila at the time, well, this could work. This seems to be working. So kumbaga, parang naging microcosm ng ini-envision nilang society, yung lugar na yon. And here, Edjop experienced the life of the people in the countryside. So, pero sa mga kwento ni Joy, sabi niya, Edjop really took the revolution to heart. He really lived simply. Talagang walang arte. Sabi ni Joy, kung ano yung kakainin ng masa, yun yung kakainin niya din. Walang reklamo. And in Joy's words, he really held himself in high standards when it comes to simple living and hard struggle. So nakikita dito yung profound willingness ni Edjop to abandon all comforts that was available to him. Nakikita dito yung profound willingness ni Edjop to abandon all comforts available to him para dun sa isang bagay na ginugulan niya ng buhay niya.
Very inspiring yan, no? So by November 1979, Edjop was reassigned to Mindanao. No, the party needed someone to look at the situation in the island and to strengthen their presence in the region. So Edjop went there, learned the language, and studied the island. He was able to produce a comprehensive, sabi nila, 200-page study on Mindanao for the perusal of the party. Unfortunately though, hanggang ngayon, hindi pa rin natin mahanap yung kopya nun. No? So, pero during his stint in Mindanao, umalagwa yung pag-oorganisa doon. No? So, he worked there for almost 3 years until, that fateful day, September 19, 1982, when he was captured in a military raid doon kanilang safe house sa Skyline Subdivision sa Davao. And at this time, Edjop kasi had a bounty on his head, no, 180,000 pesos kasi siya ay isang high-ranking CPP cadre, no? So he was captured alive, taken into interrogation and tortured again, no? And the following day, he was executed, no? Edjop died a martyr of the revolution on September 20, 1982, no? Just a day shy of the 10th anniversary of the declaration of martial law.
Edjop really was a quintessential revolutionary of his generation. Kumbaga, siya yung embodiment ng isang buong henerasyon of the most brilliant, most idealistic men and women wiped out by the dictatorship. More importantly, pinakita nitong kwento ni Edjop na yung mga tao na sumusugol sa revolusyon, they weren't born as revolutionaries. I mean, kung tutuusin, Edjop was the least likely radical. Nag-aral sa mahal na university, tiningnan bilang kaaway ng mga radikal, galing sa may kayang pamilya, pero dahil na rin sa karanasan niya, sa mga nasaksihan niyang injustices, pang-aabuso, at oppression sa masang Pilipino, he was left with no choice but to join the underground movement and the revolution.
Edjop would then be remembered as a symbol, kagaya ni Ninoy, na lumaban at namatay sa pakikibaka. So let this episode serve as our tribute to Edgar Jopson. Diba? Lider estudyante, unionista, revolusyonaryo, martir ng sambayan ng Pilipino na sa kanyang pagpupunyagi ay niyanig ang diktadurya ni Ferdinand Marcos.
Grabe, nakakaiyak talagang balikan yung kwento ng mga kagaya ni Edjop. So, he died at 34 years old. Pero yung kasaysayang buhay niya, sana magsilbing gabay, inspirasyon, at syempre, pagpapaalala sa ating lahat na let his life be a reminder that the struggle is a choice and often a difficult one. And that we could always make this choice sa kung anumang paraan.
And that's it for our episode today. Sana na-inspire kayo sa kwento ni Edjop at ng kanyang henerasyon. No, abangan ang susunod na episode ng Shapers and Shakers, Personalities of Martial Law sa Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and of course, YouTube.
Keep yourselves updated on our episodes by following us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Share nyo na rin yung episodes na to sa inyong friends.
At maraming salamat sa pakikinig hanggang sa muli, and as always, have a good day.